Okay, so good day, class. So we are done with the conceptual framework. So this time we'll proceed to the midterm coverage, which is basic accounting. So we'll go back to basic accounting. And for tonight, we will discuss the accounting equation, the double entry system, normal balance, and types of transactions. So my reference for this discussion is from Basic Financial Accounting and Reporting 2018 issue by BALLADA CPA. Okay, so based on the previous discussion, we discussed the elements of the financial statement. So we have 5 elements. You have the assets, liabilities, owner's equity, income, and expenses. Okay, so let's start first for the account. So the account is the basic summary device of accounting. So it's detailed record of increases, decreases, and balance of each element that appears in an entity's financial statement. So basically, when we say account, that refers to your asset, liabilities, owner's equity, income, and expenses. So every account uh, basically is represented by a T account. So to simplify the illustration of the account, we prepared a T account. So this is a T account. That's why it forms like letter T. So the account title here, it's depende if it's an asset account, it's a liability account, owner's equity account, income or expense account. Those are the elements of the financial statements. So this is the T account. So on your left side or the debit side, so and on the right side you have the credit side. So this is the T account. So every time you have a transaction regarding a certain account title, then you record it on the T account. It's either on the left side or on the right side, or on the debit side or the credit side. Okay, this is to simplify the illustration. At the same time, later on in the computation of balances, T account is very useful. Okay. So let's discuss, for this part, we'll discuss debits and credits and the double entry system. So what is double entry system? So accounting is based on a double entry system, which means that the dual effects of a business transaction is recorded. For every transaction, there must be one or more accounts debited and one or more accounts credited. So each transaction affects at least, take note of this, at least 2 accounts, and the total debits for transaction must always equal to the total credit. So therefore, we say double entry system, for in every transaction, diba, for every credit, for every debit, there's also a corresponding credit. Okay, so dili sa pwede nga naka-i-debit, wala ka i-credit. Take note that, diba, for every transaction, there must be one or more accounts debited and one or more accounts credited. So, dapat each transaction affects at least 2 accounts. So, and every transaction, dapat na at least 2 accounts affected. So, one is debited and one is credited. Because again, dapat in every transaction, the total debits should always equal to your total credits. Sir, what is debit and credit? So therefore, we will discuss debit and credit. If you say debit, or the abbreviation for debit, that's DR. So that's the value you receive. That's the value you receive. While credit or CR, that's the value you parted with. Okay. So in Bisaya pa, in layman's term, debit, unsay mo nadawat sa transaction. Diba? Unsay nadawat mo sa transaction, or unsa o pila ang value sa transaction nga sa transaction, or pila yung value sa imong nadawat in a certain transaction. You say credit, pila imong gihatag. Ba pila imong gihatag sa transaction. Unsa imong gihatag or pila imong gihatag sa transaction. Okay, for example, if namalingki mo, diba, adto mo og langihan, palit mo og example, nang palit ta og kamatis. Okay, tag 5. Question karon, kita nagpalit tag kamatis, unsa atong entry, di ba? Unsay debit nato, di ba? Unsay nadawat nato sa transaction? So we debit kamatis. Question, unsa atong gihatag? Cash 5, di ba? So the value is 5 pesos. So mo na siya, that's an example of a transaction, di ba? Unsa nimo pa-identify unsa ang debit, unsa ang credit. Example, nag-commute ka, before COVID, nag-commute ka pa sa eskwelahan, di ba? Sakay kag multi-cab, bayad ka, naog sa Oreos. Okay. So, for that transaction, nag-commute ka, the transaction is nag-commute ka, unsa imong debit? Unsa nadawat nimo? So basically, naka-incur kag expense, di ba? Travel expense. Because nisakay ko, nagka-expense ko because nisakay ko. How about the credit? Di ba? Unsa imong gibayad? Unsa imong gihatag? Siyempre, cash. Cash imong gihatag. So, on kanang transaction nga nag-commute ka, nag-travel ka, so imong debit is naka-incur kag expense. So, you debit travel expense, ang imong gihatag, siyempre, cash. Pila? Pumunta na to 8. Diba? Because student rate. So, ana siya. So that is an example of debit and credit. So again, debit unsa imong nadawat, ang credit unsa imong gihatag. Another example, nangutang ka, di ba? Nangutang ka sa imong classmate. Sa pagpangutang nimo, unsa imong nadawat? Siyempre cash, di ba? So debit cash. Sir, unsay credit ana sir? Nagkautang ka. That's why you credit accounts payable or payable utang. Okay, that's the credit. Okay, so I hope clear siya. So that's debit and credit. Again, double entry system. For every debit, there is a corresponding credit. But dapat equal imong debit, equal ang imong credit. Kay kung dili na sa equal, sayop imong gibuhat. Diba? In accounting, makaingon kita dapat balance tanan. Okay, so dapat balance tanan. So your debit side or your left side is equal to your right side. Kung mobalik ta diri sa T account, dapat ang total debits nimo o ang total credits nimo equal siya. Kaya if it's not equal, then nakay sayop, di ba? There's something wrong sa imong pag-account sa transaction. Okay, so after, di ba? So I hope nasabtan na debits and credits and the double entry system. So dapat for every debit there is a corresponding credit. For every transaction, at least 2 account ang affected, di ba? So one account debited, 1 account credited. Okay, let's proceed with the accounting equation. So what is basic accounting equation? This is the most basic tool in accounting, or this is the most basic tool in accounting, which is the accounting equation. So unsa atong accounting equation? So simple lang niya sa guys, plus lang, di ba? So ang operation gigamit ani, actually in accounting we only use, di ba, plus, minus, multiplication, division. But the most challenging part there is the analysis, di ba? How you analyze the transaction. So this is the basic accounting equation. So you have assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Therefore, dapat equal. So your total assets should equal to your total liabilities plus total owner's equity. Diba, this is part of the elements of the financial statement. You have asset, liabilities, and owner's equity. These accounts are also called as, diba, statement of financial position account. Diba? Statement of financial position account. So these 3 accounts can be found in your statement of financial position. Diba? And these accounts are also called as real accounts. Okay, real accounts. Okay, real accounts, or pwede po siya ginatawag na ito sa permanent accounts. Okay, permanent accounts. Okay. Permanent accounts. Okay, again, assets, liabilities, and owner's equity can be found in the statement of financial position account. These are the elements of the financial statements, can be found in the statement of financial position account, and it is called as, and they are called as real accounts. Real accounts are permanent accounts. Why permanent? Because their ending balances is carried forward in the next accounting period. So permanent siya because, diba, as long as there is ending balance, it will be forwarded on the next accounting period. That would be the beginning balance on the next accounting period. So permanent siya. As long as there is balance, always siya makita sa imong statement of financial position account. So that's why they are called permanent accounts. Okay, while the other 2 elements, diba, the income and expenses account, So later I will discuss, 'di ba, kung anong tawag sa kanila. Okay. So again, this is your basic accounting equation, that is asset should always equal to liabilities plus owner's equity. So if dili sa equal, so there's something wrong in your accounting. Diba? There's something wrong in your accounting if dili sa balance. Again, everything should be balanced in accounting. That's asset equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Sir, example, what if you have total assets 100? Then your liabilities is 30. Question now is, missing ang imong owner's equity. Diba? Pila ang owner's equity? So since based on the accounting equation, total assets should equal to your total liabilities plus owner's equity, dapat imong owner's equity is equal to 70. Because 30 plus 70, that's equal to 100 assets. So, nana lang siya. Diba? So dapat equal imong assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. This will help you in the preparation. This is a tool that will help you in the preparation of the statement of financial position. Diba? The reports or the FS, specifically the statement of financial position. Okay. So, okay, under assets, assets are classified into two. You have current assets and non-current assets. Okay, so what is current asset? Okay, so current assets and non-current assets. So what is current asset? So as per revised PAS 1, an entity shall classify assets. So asset daw ang account or ang account when it expects to realize the asset or intends to sell or consume it in its normal operating cycle. So the assets are expected to be realized or intend to sell or consume the asset in its normal operating cycle. You say normal operating cycle, that's the normal that's the normal transaction operation of a certain entity. So for example, if a certain entity 1 year is the normal operating cycle for them, then that's the normal operating cycle. So there are also some entities that for them 2 years is normal operating cycle. But if the problem is silent, diba, wala nag-ingon pila ka years ang normal operating cycle, so it is assumed that 1 year ang normal operating cycle. Aside from this, it holds the asset primarily for the purpose of trading. So if the purpose is for trading, diba, automatically the account is classified as current asset. It expects to realize the asset within 12 months after the reporting period. So again, it is expected to realize the asset within 12 months after the reporting period, diba? 12 months after end of the accounting period. Or the asset is cash or cash equivalent unless the asset is restricted from being exchanged or used to settle a liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. So if the asset is cash or cash equivalent, automatic, they're classified as current asset unless restricted. Unless restricted yung cash at saka yung cash equivalent. Okay, all other assets should be classified as non-current assets. So if it does not fall, diba, within this criteria, so automatic the asset is classified as non-current asset. Okay. So you have examples here under current assets. So you have cash equivalents, you have the notes receivable, accounts receivable, inventories, prepaid expenses. Take note, prepaid expenses is an asset account. Sir, ganong expenses man siya. So, careful mo aniya because prepaid expenses is an asset account. You say prepaid expenses, nagbayad ka in advance although wala pa nimo sa gigamit. Example, rentals, diba? So, rentals, on the first month pa lang, nagbayad na ka good for 1 year. So, naka-advance payment ka for 12 months or 1 year imong rentals. Therefore, on your part, that is considered as prepaid expenses or prepaid rental. So that is an asset account, not an expense account. Okay, so non-current asset, example of non-current asset, you have property, plant, and equipment. You have accumulated depreciation. Take note that accumulated depreciation is a contra asset account. Yung say contra asset account, di ba contra? So, iyang kontrahon ng asset. Therefore, this is a deduction on your property, plant, and equipment account. So, it's a contra property, plant, and equipment account. So, si accumulated depreciation. So, iyang i-decrease ang balance ni property, plant, and equipment, especially when we compute the carrying amount because PPA is presented in the financial statement at carrying amount or at book value. Okay, so again, take note, accumulated depreciation is a contra asset account. Then last is intangible assets. Example of intangible asset, you have mga copyright, di ba? Mga franchise, yes, franchise fees. So those are examples of intangible assets. How about liabilities? Liabilities is also classified as current liabilities and non-current liabilities. So, what do you mean by current liabilities? So, as per revised PAS 1, an entity shall classify liability as current when it expects to settle the liability in its normal operating cycle. So, again, normal operating cycle. Diba? So, they expected to settle the liability within its normal operating cycle. Therefore, it's a current liability. Second, it holds the liability primarily for the purpose of trading. Nangutang ka because gamito nimo for trading purposes. For the business nga imong ginaran. So, that is considered, basta for trading purposes, that is considered as current. And within the normal operating cycle. The liability is due to be settled within 12 months after the reporting period. So, if the liability is due or to be settled within 12 months after the accounting period, end of the accounting period, and the entity does not have unconditional right to defer settlement of the liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period, therefore, the account is classified as current liability. So, pag naani silang upat. And all other liabilities should be classified as non-current assets. So if, di ba, it does not fall within these criteria, automatic the liability shall be classified as non-current liability. So basically, when we say current, it's for short-term purposes within the normal operating cycle for trading purposes. But when we say non-current, it's either asset or liability, di ba? It's for long-term purposes. Di ba? Basically, more than 1 year siya. So that's more than 1 year ang iyang period, kumbaga time period niya. So these are examples under current liabilities. That's accounts payable. So basically, accounts payable, utang nga within the normal operating cycle bayaran. Notes payable. So kanina, like promissory notes, you issue a promissory note. So that is considered as notes payable, di ba, supported by a note. You have accrued liabilities. When you say accrued liabilities, these are expenses nga nagamit na nimo pero wala pa nimo nabayaran. 'Di ba? Nagamit na nimo ang rent, naka-rent na ka. Example na lang sa plan, 'di ba? So kaning mga PLDT, Globe nato, 'di ba? Subscription. Nagamit na nato within 1 month pero wala pa ta nagbayad, wala pa nato nabayaran because 'di ba ang bayaran sa naay ka ng specific period, date. So it is considered current liability because, di ba, expense na siya, nagamit na nato, pero napatay bayro doon, pa nato siya nabayaran. That's accrued liabilities. You see, unearned revenues, sir, revenue man siya, nganong under man siya sa liability. Bantay po mo ani because, di ba, unearned revenues is not a revenue account, it's a liability account. You see, unearned revenue, di ba, unearned, wala pa nimo na earn na revenue. Example ani. I am a bookkeeper. Diba? I am a bookkeeper. Tapos, for the month of September 1 pa lang, gibayaran ako ni customer, ni client. Sir, bayaran ta kakaron advance payment na. So, nakadawat kag advance payment. So, on your part, since wala pa ka naka-render og service, di ba? Wala pa nimo na earn ang or naka-render og service o pa nimo na earn ang revenue, but nanakay na dawat. Di ba? Nanakay na dawat nga payment in advance. So sa imo nga part, on my part as a bookkeeper, na ako'y utang nga services. That's why that is unearned revenues. Na ako'y utang nga services nga wala pa nako na earn ang akong revenue because wala pa ako naka-render og service. So that is unearned revenues. Take note that unearned revenue is a liability account and current portion of a long-term debt. So, di ba, 5 years to pay na debt pero within 1 year naka-installment siya. So, the current portion under sa current liabilities, but the non-current portion under sa non-current liabilities. So, example of non-current liabilities, you have mortgage payable, you have bonds payable. Okay, let's proceed with equity. Okay, owner's equity, this is the composition of owner's equity. Diba? It's one account lang na siya, but unsay composition ani niya to compute the ending balances. So we have 4 components of the owner's equity. You have capital or investment. It's either initial or the original capital or additional capital or investment. As long as it's an investment, it's a capital, then that is added to compute the owner's total owner's equity or the ending balance of your owner's equity. How about withdrawals? Sir, unsa na withdrawals? Example, nakaginansa, bali si owner, nagkuha sa kwarta sa business. Again, it's a separate entity, di ba? Accounting entity concept. Separate si business, separate si owner. So, on the part of the business, kung naigikuha nga kwarta si owner, kang business, i-consider niya to as withdrawals. Okay, that is withdrawals. So, that's why it's deducted in computing the owner's equity of the entity of the business. Okay, so that is withdrawal. That is deducted to compute the owner's equity. Then, naadiri ang income and expense. So, although this income and expense, di ba, under sa elements of the financial statements, the income and expenses. So, basically, the income and expenses under siya kang owner's equity. So, actually, di ba, the result of income and expenses, pwede siya net income. Okay, this is your ginansa. This is net income or ang imong logi. Di ba? Because if income is greater than your expenses, therefore, nakay ginansa, nakay net income. Bantayin niyo ang net income and net income is not the same. Ha? So, income and net income is not the same. So, if the income is greater than the expenses, nakay net income, nakay ginansa. But if the income is lesser than the expenses, nakay lugi, di ba? Net loss ka. Therefore, your income and expenses is under there sa kang owner's equity. So, if there is income, the owner's equity will increase, di ba? Naka-plus. And if there is expense, the owner's equity will decrease. So, minus siya. So, basically, if there is net income, i-add siya to compute the owner's equity. If there is net loss, you deduct it in computing the owner's equity. So, again, this is the component of your owner's equity. So, you have capital or investment. It's either original or additional investment. Withdrawals of the owner or capital investment of the owner. You have the income and you have the expenses. So, that is the component of your owner's equity. So, di ba, income and expenses, di ba, under the elements of the financial statements, these two can be found in the statement of financial performance. Financial performance. Or, simply stated, income statement. Because before income statement na ginagamit karon, it's a statement of financial performance na siya. So, these two items or elements of the financial statement can be found in the statement of financial performance, while these three can be found in the statement of financial position. Okay, statement of financial position. Okay, kagaina kung si asset liabilities and owner's equity is under statement of financial position, it is called as real accounts or permanent accounts. On the other hand, income and expenses account can be found in the statement of financial performance and it is called as nominal account or temporary account. Kagaina, permanent si asset, liabilities, and owner's equity, your income and expenses account are classified or are considered as temporary accounts. Why temporary? Okay, temporary accounts. So why temporary? Because income and expenses account, their balances cannot be forward in the next accounting period. So they're only intended for that certain period. Dira lang sila nga period, dili ma-forward ilang balance to the next period because income and expenses at the end of the accounting period, it is close to your owner's equity account. Or therefore, at the end of the year, you zero out the balances of income and expenses account, then start na pagka next year. Okay, so that's why if you have noticed katong mga ABM students, di ba wala tay makita nga sales beginning, cost of sales beginning, interest expense beginning, di ba wala? Because income and expenses are called temporary accounts. They're only temporary, they're only intended for that specific accounting period. Their balances cannot be forward in the next accounting period. Dili pareha sa asset, liabilities, and owner's equity. Their ending balances for this period will be carried forward and will become the beginning balance of the next accounting period. That's why they're called permanent accounts. So I hope that's clear ha, that temporary lang ang income and expense account, di ba? Dira lang siya nga year i-record, their balances will not be carried forward on the next accounting period. Because again, income and expenses are part of the owner's equity. They are close to the owner's equity account at the end of the accounting period. Okay, but we will discuss that thorough in the next siguro classes or in the next discussions. Okay. Let's have an illustration with the accounting equation. Di ba? Our accounting equation is asset equals liabilities plus owner's equity. So you have illustration 1 to apply the equation. So that is equal plus. So if we try to look at the problem, fill in the amount of the missing element of financial position. Take note, financial position. Kinsa ganito mga accounts under statement of financial position, you have your asset, liabilities, and owner's equity. Kani sila tulo. Okay, so letter A, you have 760,000 assets and you have 360,000 liabilities. The question is pila yung owner's equity, 'di ba? Basic, 'di ba? You just need to compute pila ang owner's equity para mo equal siya sa 760, 'di ba? So that you have 360 nga liability. So the operation here is 760, 'di ba? Minus 760 minus 360, pila yung owner's equity. So that is 400,000. Therefore, your owner's equity is 400,000. Diba? Pwede rin mo na i-derive ang formula. You can derive the formula, di ba? That's asset, cost, liabilities plus owner's equity. So, if equity ang gipangita, o balhin mo si liability dito. That's transposition. That's, di ba? Asset minus liability. If si liability po ang missing, okay, you transfer owner's equity, same. Asset minus owner's equity to compute the missing amount, which is the liability account. Second, letter B. So, missing si liability. So, that's 860. You have total assets 860. Dapat equal. So, the total liabilities plus owner's equity. You have 592 na owner's equity. So, atong button ani, that's 860 minus 592. Okay, that is 268,000. So, number 2 is 268. Letter B is 268,000. Sensya na lang mo sa kan guys ha. Sa pagsulat kay lisod ang mouse. Okay. Letter C, the missing missing account is the assets. So you have 108 liabilities, you have 760 owner's equity. So dapat equal, so i-add lang ning duha, di ba? So that's 180 plus 760. That is equal to 940,000. Therefore, letter C, your total assets should be 940,000. Okay. Letter D, you have 626,600 assets. You have liabilities of 376,240. So the missing account is the owner's equity. So minus lang gyapon ta, that's 626,600 minus 376,240. So that is equal to 250, bukig pa dun, 360. So that is the answer for letter D, that this is your total liabilities. Sorry, this is your owner's equity, 250, 360 kani. Letter E, the missing account is assets. Diba? So you have 800 liabilities, you have negative 100,000 for owner's equity. Pasabot ani, diba? Based on the composition, siguro daghan ang giwid, nasubraan ang gi-withdraw, or nalugi sa, nagka-net loss. Diba? Nagka-net loss because mas dako ang expense compared to the income. Okay, so diba unsa tong button ani, pila total assets nato? Diba dapat equal. So just 800 minus 100,000. So your assets should equal to 700,000. Diba? Plus negative 100,000. Therefore, your total assets should equal to 700,000 para mabalance ang equation. Okay, so this is statement of financial position. This is also, diba, same gyapon ni accounting equation, but the given is the income and expenses account. So, diba? So, we need to compute, supply the missing element of performance, diba? Or the statement of financial performance. Again, accounts or elements that can be found in the statement of financial performance are income and expenses account. They're also called as nominal account or temporary account. So, letter A, you have 840, missing ang expenses, na kay profit, positive nga 360. Therefore, your income is greater than your expenses because nagka-positive siya, nagka-profit siya. So, pila yung expenses. So, deduct lang ta, 840 minus 360. You have total expenses of 480,000. That's 480. Okay, 480,000. Letter B, you have 2,400,000 income, missing ang expenses, but you have a profit because wala naka-parenthesis. So, niginansa gyapon kag 540. Question karon, pila yung expenses? So, again, same procedure. That's operation. That's 2,400,000 minus 540. Okay, that is 1,860,000. That is your total expenses. So, your income is greater than your expenses. Therefore, nagka-profit ka og 540,000. So, that's 1,860,000. So, letter C, you have total income of 1,300,000. You have expenses of 860. How much is the profit or loss? So, simple. That's 1,300,000 minus 860. That's 440,000. Okay, diba? Very basic. Okay, letter D. Missing ang income, you have expenses of 2 million, but still you have a profit of 720,000. So, since there's a profit, so given that the income is greater than your expenses. So, what to do? So, add lang nato ni, diba? So, that's 720 plus 2,200,000, that is 2,720,000 ang total income minus the total expense of 2 million, then you still have a profit of 720,000. Letter E, missing is the income, you have expenses of 1,800,000, you have a loss because naka-negative siya, di ba? Naka-parenthesis. So, lugi kag 400,000. Pasabot, your expenses is greater than your income. So, naka-expense nga 1,800,000, so pila imong income? So, that is, di ba, 1,400,000 because 1,400,000 minus 1,800,000, that's negative 400,000 or loss of 400,000. So, that is how you compute or how you apply the basic accounting equation. Letter C, it's a more medyo complicated problem siya. So, let's solve letter C. So, at the beginning of the year daw, at the beginning, take note ha, so na-balance sa beginning. Why? Because ang iyang gihatag dere is si asset owner's equity. So again, they are permanent accounts. Their ending balances of the period of the previous accounting period is carried forward as the beginning balance of the next accounting period. So beginning of the year, pasabot, this is the beginning balance na daw asset si Cleo of Arib Services of 360. So nasa asset beginning 360,000 and its owner's equity was 200,000. So based on the equation, na si owner's equity nga 200,000. Pero wala giingon pila ang liability. So again, because diba dapat equal ang imong equation, we can easily compute pila ang beginning balance ni liability even wala gihatag sa problem. So you have 360 asset equals missing ang liability plus 200,000 nga owner's equity. Therefore, your liability is equal to 160,000 para mabalance ang equation. Diba? 160,000. So that's 160 plus 200, that's equal to 360,000. That's beginning, diba? This is the beginning balance. But during the year, the assets daw increased by 120. Therefore, during the year, na yung mga transactions during the year, ang asset ni increase to 120. And liabilities increase by, take note of by and to, di ba? Pwede sa mautrong answer if ang gigamit sa problem is by or to, di ba? So increase by na dungagan sa 120, pag may increase to, sabot mo na iyang balance pag to, di ba? Okay, so ni-increase po daw ang liability by 20,000. But wala gihatag pilay increase sa owner's equity, di ba? So diri missing na po ang owner's equity diri. Sir, how to compute, di ba? The question is, what is the owner's equity at the end of the year? So the question is ending balance. Okay, so this is the beginning balance, this is the transaction during the year. Pila day ang balance sa imong owner's equity ending. We try to compute pila ending sa asset, that's 360 plus 120, that is 480. We can compute for the liability, di ba? Because nakakompute tagain na although wala gihatag ang beginning balance, but we computed the 160. So that's 160 plus 20, that is 180. Therefore, to make the equation balance, that's 480 equals 180 plus pila ang owner's equity. So 180 minus or 480 minus 180, dapat ang balance mong owner's equity is equal to 300,000. Okay, so the answer is 300,000. This is the ending balance of your equity. So kaning question mark dire, we can compute already, di ba? Because na 200 beginning balance, na ending nga 300, pila din hitabo na add during the year. So that is 100. Di ba? So 100 ang increase ni owner's equity for that certain period, for the year. Okay, this is how you compute or how you apply the accounting equation. Okay, I hope gets lang siya, class. Okay, let's proceed with the normal balance of an account. What do you mean by normal balance? Diba normal? Diba normal niya nga balance? So every account has its own normal balance. So the normal balance of any account refers to the side of the account, debit or credit, where increases are recorded. So, pasabot ani, every account has its own normal balance. When can we say nga normal balance sa niya? So, makaingon tag normal balance if i-debit nato siya, mo increase ang iyang balance. Diba? If i-credit nato ni nga account, mo increase iyang balance, mo na iyang normal balance credit. So again, diba, normal balance is kung aha sa nga side mo increase. Example, si asset, kung ato sang i-debit si asset, mo increase or mo decrease iyang balance. If mo increase iyang balance, pasabot ang normal balance ni asset is debit. Pero kung gi-credit nato ang asset tapos ni-decrease iyang balance, that's not the normal balance of asset. Okay, so again, the normal balance kung aha sa nga side mo increase, diba? So it increases the account's balances. So that is the normal balance. So here, each account or each element of the financial statement has its own normal balance. Okay, naslay kanya-kanyang normal balance. Asset has a normal balance of debit. So, every time we debit asset, mo increase day ang balance ni asset. Mo increase ang total balance ni asset. Okay, so every time we debit cash equivalent, every time we debit these accounts, the total asset will increase also. The balance of the total asset will increase. Sir, what if the credit? Again, the normal balance of asset is debit. Sir, what if the credit nimo ang cash? Pasabot, mo decrease ang balance ni total asset because dili niya normal balance to. Diba? So, every time you debit an asset, it will increase its balance. But every time you credit the asset, it will decrease the balance of the total asset. So, take note lang ta dire, pag-abot dire sa accumulated depreciation, di ba, ingon ta kagaina, the normal balance of asset is debit. So, every time you debit an asset account, it will increase its balance. So, that is the normal balance of asset. And every time we credit an asset account, it will decrease its balance. But accumulated depreciation, this is part of your asset, since it's a contra asset account, di ba? Contra asset account, pasabot kontrahon niya ang asset, i-deductan niya ang balance ni asset. Therefore, the normal balance of your contra asset account nga si accumulated depreciation is credit. So, every time you credit accumulated depreciation, i-decrease niya ang balance ni property, plant, and equipment because again, it's a contra asset account. So, kanisiya, medyo nasa exemption na. So, under sa assets, but it is considered as a contra asset account. Diba? Iyang didakkan ang balance ni account. Contra asset, iyang kontrahon ang asset ni account. Therefore, the normal balance of the contra asset account accumulated depreciation is credit. Every time we credit accumulated depreciation, it will increase its balance. Increase iyang balance. So, in effect, mo decrease ang balance ni property, plant, and equipment because it's a contra asset account. So, again, the normal balance of asset is debit. So, every time you debit an asset account, it will increase its total asset balance. Okay, but if we credit an asset account, it will decrease its balance. How about liabilities? What is the normal balance of liabilities, di ba? So, kung you say normal balance, kung ato sang i-debit or credit mo, increase ang iyang balance ni liability. So, ahaman sa nga side, nga mo increase ang balance ni liability. So, liabilities has a normal balance of credit. So, every time we credit a liability account, it will increase its total balance. Increase ang total balance ni liabilities. Every time we credit a liability account. Okay, so if we credit accounts payable, if we credit notes payable, if we credit all these accounts, the total balance of the liability will increase because again, the normal balance of liability is credit. Okay, sir, what if we debit accounts payable? Therefore, if we debit accounts payable account or a liability account, what will happen to the total balance of liabilities? It will decrease because dili niya normal balance ang debit. So, in liabilities, the normal balance is credit. Pasabot, every time we credit a liability account, ipang credit na to ni sila, it will increase its total balance. But every time we debit a liability account, it will decrease its total balance. So, muubos siya. Because again, the normal balance, dito siya mo increase. Mo increase yung total balance. Kung ani mo sa ibutang aside, mo increase yung total balance. Okay. How about owner's equity? So what is the normal balance of owner's equity? In general, owner's equity has a normal balance of credit. So in general, owner's equity has a normal balance of credit. So every time we credit an owner's equity, so it will increase its balance. But take note that owner's equity has 4 components. Diba nasa 4 components? You have the capital investment, withdrawals, income, and expenses. In computing the owner's equity balance, diba, you have pag na-capital na investment naka-plus, pag na-withdrawals naka-minus, pag na-income naka-plus, pag na-expense naka-minus. So, although the normal balance of owner's equity is credit, but each component has its own normal balances. Diba? In general, credit siya, but their component di ba, has its own normal balances. So si capital na i-own normal balance, si withdrawal na i-own normal balance, si income and expense. For capital and investment, since plus siya, the normal balance is naka-credit siya. Di ba? Because idugang sa kang owner's equity in computing the owner's equity. Tapos si owner's equity mo increase pag naka-credit. So that's why capital investment, since plus siya in computing the owner's equity, it has a credit balance. It has a normal balance of credit. How about withdrawals? Diba? Withdrawals is deducted in computing the owner's equity. Therefore, pag na-withdrawals, mo decrease ang balance ni owner's equity. And we know that the normal balance in general of owner's equity is credit. So, pag mo decrease iyang balance, pasabot, nag-debit ka. Therefore, withdrawals has a normal balance of debit. So, pasabot, every time you debit withdrawals, it will decrease your total owner's equity. Because again, the normal balance of owner's equity in general is credit. Okay, how about income? Diba? It's addition or it's added in computing the owner's equity balance. So since added siya, so every time there's an income, mo increase ang balance ni owner's equity. Therefore, income has a normal balance of credit. So every time you credit income, it will increase your income. At the same time, it will increase your owner's equity. Again, if you credit an income account, it will increase your income balance. Kaya naman po sila yung own balances. Diba? So, it will increase your income balance. At the same time, it will increase your owner's equity. Diba? But if we debit an income account, it will decrease the income balance. At the same time, it will decrease the owner's equity balance. So again, the normal balance of income is credit. Every time you credit an income account, it will increase the balance of the income. At the same time, it will increase the balance of the owner's equity account. And if we debit an income account, it will decrease the balance of the income account. At the same time, it will decrease the balance of the owner's equity account. Next, you have expenses. Expenses is deducted in computing the owner's equity. Therefore, kung deducted siya, what is the normal balance of the expenses? So, expenses as a normal balance of debit. Diba? Kaya kung mag-debit tag expense, it will decrease your owner's equity balance because again, the normal balance of equity is credit. So, if we debit an expense account, it will increase the balance of expense, but it will decrease the balance of owner's equity. Take note of this, diba? If we debit an expense account, since the normal balance of expense is debit, every time we debit an expense account, it will increase the expense account, but it will decrease the owner's equity account. Okay, so every time we debit an expense account, it will increase the balance of expense account, but it will decrease the balance of owner's equity account. So what if we credit an expense account? We credit an expense account. So if mag-credit tayo expense account, it will decrease the balance of your expense because again, di ba, the normal balance of expense is debit. Pag i-credit nato, mubaba ay mong expense account, what will happen to your owner's equity account? It will increase your owner's equity account because again, naka-credit. In general, owner's equity has a credit balance. Okay, so inana siya ang effect niya sa imong owner's equity. So although owner's equity has a credit balance, has a credit normal balance, but its composition has its own different normal balances. For capital investment, normal balance is credit. So every time you have additional investment, if every time you credit an investment or capital account, it will increase your capital investment account. At the same time, it will increase your owner's equity. So withdrawals account has a normal balance of debit. If you debit a withdrawal account, it will increase the balance of withdrawals, but it will decrease the balance of owner's equity. Income has a normal balance of credit. If you credit an income account, it will increase the balance of income account. At the same time, it will increase the balance of your owner's equity account. Last is the expense account. The normal balance is debit. every time you debit an expense account, it will increase the expense balance, but it will decrease the owner's equity balance. And every time you credit an expense account, it will decrease the expense balance, but it will increase your owner's equity balance. So that is the normal balance of an account. Asset has a normal balance of debit, and the contra asset account has a normal balance of credit. Okay, liabilities has a normal balance of credit, and owner's equity has a normal balance of credit, but its composition, its component has its own normal balances. So kaning upat. So if you try to notice with the accounting equation, di ba balance gyapon sa pasabot pud ani total debits is equal to your total credits. So maningking ka gina sa double entry system. Diba? For every debit, there is a corresponding credit. And it should always equal. Your total debit should always equal to your total credits. Because if it's not equal, diba, there's something wrong in your accounting. Okay. So, if I'm going to ask you this, I hope nasabtan siya, no? Normal balance. So, if mag-ask ko sa inyo, what is the effect to my total assets? Diba? What is the effect? It's either increase, decrease, or no effect, di ba? So, what will happen to my total assets if nag-debit ko og cash nga account? So, again, what will happen to my total asset balance if I debit cash? So, the answer is, it will increase my total asset balance because the normal balance of cash is debit. So every time I debit an asset account, it will increase the total asset balance. Since cash is an asset account, it is debited, it's under its normal balance, therefore the total asset will increase. Okay, another example. What will happen to my liability account, total liability account, if I debited accounts payable account? Diba? What will happen to my total liability account if I debited accounts payable account? So the answer is, it will decrease. Why? Because the normal balance of liability is credit. So every time you credit a liability account, it will increase your total liability balance. But in the problem, in the example, I debited accounts payable account. Therefore, it's not their normal balance. So, gidebit na ko accounts payable, unsay effect niya sa total liability? So, it will decrease. Because again, the normal balance of liability is credit, and you debit the accounts payable account, then therefore, it will decrease the total liabilities account. So, ana lang mga question. Okay, another example. If I credit an income account, diba? If nag-credit ko og income account, what will happen to my total income account balance? Diba? If I credit an income account, what will happen to my total income balance? So, ang question na, total income balance. If nag-credit kog income, pilay unsay effect sa akong total income balance. So, siyempre, the effect is, it will increase. Why? Because the normal balance of income is credit. So, every time you credit an income account, it will increase the total balance of your income. Okay. Other question. If I credit an income account, if nag-credit kong income account, what will happen to my total owner's equity account? Diba? If nag-credit kong income account, what will happen to my total owner's equity account? Increase, decrease? The answer is increase. Why? Because diba, the normal balance of owner's equity is credit, and you credited an income account. Therefore, naka-add siya. So, it will increase the balance of your owner's equity. Okay, last example. If I debit an expense account, what is the effect to my total expense account? Okay, take note of the question. If I debit an expense account, what is the effect to my total expense account? Increase, decrease? Okay, the answer is increase. Why increase? Again, my question is, what is the effect to my total expense account? So, therefore, I debited an expense account. The normal balance of expense is debit. So, when every time I debit an expense account, it will increase the balance of the expense account. That's why the answer is it will increase. Diba? So, if I debit an expense account, it will increase my total expense account. Okay, that's the question. No? Kani, another way, diba? Another question. If I debit an expense account, nag-debit to expense account, unsay effect niya sa akong owner's equity? Diba? If I debit an expense account, unsay effect niya sa akong owner's equity? The answer is it will decrease. Why? Because again, 'di ba, the normal balance of owner's equity is credit. But 'di ba, you debited, nag-debit kag expense. So this is the same on normal balance. Therefore, it will decrease your owner's equity. Take note of that question ha, basin maglibog mo. So, bantayin ninyo unsa ang pangutana. So, I hope it's clear ha, normal balance, 'di ba? It will increase, 'di ba? Normal balance sa ana niya, it will increase the balance of a certain account. So, that's the normal the side in which the balances of the account will increase, or the balance of the account will increase. Okay, so next up. Okay, last, we have types and effects of transactions. So again, di ba, every transaction, there is a corresponding debit and credit under double entry system. Di ba? So every transaction po, we use accounts, di ba? Because di ba, like in every transaction, unsa atong na-receive, unsa atong i-debit, unsa atong i-credit. And kanang mga accounts nga atong i-debit o credit, it's either that's an asset, liabilities, owner's equity, income and expense account, di ba? Katong 5 elements of the financial statement. So this time, let's identify what type of transaction. Unsa sa nga transaction? Okay, so we have 4 types of transactions. So you have source of assets, you have use of assets, you have exchange of assets, and exchange of claims. When you say claims, diba, claims refers to your liabilities and owner's equity. So claims refers to your liabilities and owner's equity. Okay, so again claims refers to your liability and owner's equity. So this is your asset. So still, this is connected to the accounting equation yapon. Diba? So first type of transaction is source of asset. Yung say source of asset, diba? So a transaction nga nagka-asset ka. So these are the effects, diba, of type of transaction nga source of asset. So money ang mga transaction, money effects sa transaction. Now we can identify, we can classify that the transaction is source of asset if money nahitabo sa transaction. If your asset increases, diba, if ni-increase imong asset, equals to increase in liabilities. So balance gap po ni mga accounting equation, di ba? So your accounting equation, okay, di ba, ni-increase ang asset, kung mo increase siya, dapat na mo increase po ng pika side. That's why inay-increase sa liabilities. So balance gap po ng equation. Okay, so if mo increase ang asset po, dapat mo increase po ang right side. So, ni-increase ang owner's equity. So, if this is the effect of the transaction, na-increase sa asset, na-increase sa liabilities, or there's an increase in asset and increase in owner's equity, therefore, the type of transaction tawag sa source of assets. Di ba, nagka-asset ka, ni-increase mong asset. Okay. So, the second type of transaction is use of asset. So, example din sa source of asset, di ba? Nangutang ka sa bank. Diba? Nangutang ka sa bank, in that transaction, unsay imong nadawat, diba? Unsay debit nimo? Diba? You debit cash. Kay nangutang ka sa bank, diba? The debit is cash. Diba? Unsay imong credit? Nagkautang ka, credit utang, diba? Credit utang or liability. Therefore, in this transaction, nag-debit ka og cash, diba? Normal balance of cash is debit. So kay nag-debit ka og cash, mo increase imong asset. Nag-credit ka og utang or liability. The normal balance of liability is credit. Gi-credit nimo ang utang, unsa effect niya sa imong liability? Increase pud imong liability, diba? So that's increase in asset equals increase in liability. This example of kaning source of asset nga transaction kani siya. Kani increase in assets, increase in owner's equity. Sir, sa example ana. Example, because di ba accounting entity concept, kani pwede siya nag-render ka og service, di ba? So nag-render ka og service, gibayaran ka ni customer. So nag-render ta og service, gibayaran tag cash si customer, unsa atong nadawat kang customer? Cash. Unsa atong i-credit? Diba? Unsa atong i-credit? That's the debit, cash, atong nadawat. Unsa atong gihatag? Service. Diba? Service. That service, syempre income na to nimo. That service, income. Diba? So that's a revenue account. That's an income account. So in that certain transaction, we render a service cash basis. So nag-render tag service, gibayaran ta ni customer sa atong debit, unsa atong nadawat cash, unsa atong gihatag service nato atong gihatag. So that is considered income on our part. Di ba naka-earn ta? So this is an example, increase in asset, increase in owner's equity. Again, di ba, cash is an asset account. We debit cash, we debit an asset account, therefore it will increase our total assets. How about service income? The normal balance of income is credit. We credit service income or we credit income account. Then it will increase the income account. At the same time, it will increase your owner's equity. So this is the example. Okay. Use of assets. Okay, use of assets. So here, di ba, gigamit nimo ang asset. So this second type of transaction. Unsa effect ana niya sa transaction? So if there's a decrease in asset at the same time decrease in liabilities, pasabot use of asset na siya. If there's a decrease in asset and at the same time there's a decrease in owner's equity, di ba? It's a use of asset transaction. So, di ba, balance gyapon ang equation, di ba? Ni decrease diri ang asset, ni decrease pud ang liability or ni decrease ang owner's equity. So, sir, sa example aning decrease in asset, decrease in liability. Nagbayad ta sa tong utang, di ba? Kagaina nangutang ta, karon nagbayad ta sa tong utang, nagbayad ta. So, kabalo ta atong gihatag, atong gi-credit cash. Di ba? Kay nagbayad ta sa tong utang. Unsa atong i-debit? I-debit na to ang utang, di ba? Gitanggal na nato ang utang. Wa na koy utang kay nagbayad nako. Therefore, by crediting the cash, di ba? It's an asset account. Unsa effect sa imong total asset, gi-credit nimo ang asset? It will decrease because dili niya normal balance ang credit. So mo decrease ang asset. How about the utang, the liability? We debit the liability, di ba? Kay mo atong nadawat, gi-cancel na to ang utang, kay gibayaran na nato. So what will happen to your total liabilities? It will decrease also. Why? Because the normal balance of liability or utang is credit, but we debit the utang, in effect, it will decrease the total liabilities. So balance gyapon ang equation. So pag inani ang effect sa transaction, then the type of transaction is use of asset. Next, decrease in asset equals decrease in owner's equity. Example ani, nagbayad ta og ANECO bill. Di ba? So, nagbayad ta og kuryente sa ANECO. Di ba? So, ang transaction nagbayad tag kuryente sa ANECO. Unsa atong credit, nagbayad man ta, so we credit cash. Di ba? Unsa atong i-debit, kuryente, di ba? Kinagamit tag kuryente. So that's expense, kuryente expense. Pupunta na nato, kuryente expense. Mo na atong gi-debit. Gasto, nakagasto ta. So, by crediting cash, unsa effect niya sa total asset? It will decrease. Again, dili normal balance ni cash or ni asset ang credit, but we credit cash because nagbayad ta. Therefore, it will decrease the asset. How about kuryente expense? It's an expense account, di ba? Yes, the normal balance of expense is debit, di ba? So, what will happen to the total expense balance? It will increase, but the question now, unsa effect niya sa owner's equity? Diba? It will decrease the owner's equity account because the normal balance of owner's equity is credit, but with debit and expense account, siyempre, mo deduct din siya sa imong owner's equity account. So, it will decrease. So, that is the example of use of asset. Okay, exchange of asset. Diba, nagbaylo lang ta og asset. Diba, nagbaylo lang og asset. So, unsay example ani nagbaylo lang og asset? So, example, nagpautang kasi mong customer. Diba, kita ang nagpautang. Therefore, naata gitawag nga receivable. 'Di ba? After 1 month, gibayaran ni customer ang iyang utang. Therefore, pagbayad ni customer sa iyang utang, unsa atong i-debit, unsa atong nadawat? Nadawat tag cash, gibayaran niya ang iyang utang. Unsa atong i-credit? Atong receivable. 'Di ba? Atong accounts receivable. Natay dawatunon kang customer pero at the end of the month gibayaran niya. So dito ta sa gibayaran niya. 'Di ba? So pagbayad ni customer, unsa to nadawat? Cash kay gibayaran ta, nag-debit ta, di ba? Nadawat nato. Unsa atong gihatag? Ihatag nato, ibalik nato ang receivable ni customer. Tanggalon na nato ang receivable because nabayaran na niya. So we credit accounts receivable. Therefore, unsa effect niya? Di ba? Exchange of asset ina niyang effect. Ni-increase ang asset at the same time ni-decrease ang asset. Equal ba gyapon ang equation? Yes, equal gyapon ang equation. Although walay nahitabo sa liabilities and owner's equity, but under your asset ni increase at the same time ni decrease. Zero gyapon ang effect, di ba? So na-offset ang effect niya. So therefore, increase in asset kaning cash, di ba? Because with debit cash, the normal balance of asset is debit, therefore it will increase your total asset. But since you credited an accounts receivable account, it's an asset account, diba? Naka-credit siya, wala sa siyang normal balance, therefore it will decrease your total asset. So man is a decrease in asset. So in short, mura na gyapon offset ang effect aning exchange of asset. Dirita sa exchange of claims, medyo daghan. So exchange of claims, you have increase in liabilities, decrease in owner's equity. Still balance ang equation, diba? Walay effect sa asset, walay nahitabo sa asset, ni-increase imong liab at the same time ni-decrease pud imong owner's equity. So zero gyapon ang effect. Okay, decrease in liabilities, increase in owner's equity. So same gyapon, zero effect, ni-decrease ang imong liability pero nisaka pa imong owner's equity. Okay, next is kani increase in liability at the same time there's a decrease in other liability. So ni-increase ang isa ka liability pero nibaba pod ang isa ka liability. Therefore, offset gyapon ang effect niya. So, pag inana, the type of transaction, exchange of claims. Kani, in owners, increase in owner's equity, tapos decrease in owner's equity in other owner equity account. Okay, so, same. Balance gyapon ang equation. Walay effect sa asset, walay effect sa liability, but ni-increase ang owner's equity at the same time, nag-decrease siya. Okay. So, the effect is, kumbaga, wala gyapon sa effect. And the equation is still balanced. But take note again na, for every transaction na i-debit na i-credit, tapos dapat same amount siya, equal siya. So, that's why, yan yung effect niya. So, again, we have types of transactions. You have source of assets, use of assets, exchange of assets, exchange of claims. Tapos, we can identify the type of transaction based on the effect of the transaction. So, these are the effects under source of assets. So, increase asset equals increase in liabilities. Increase in asset equals increase in owner's equity. Under exchange of asset, increase ang asset at the same time, ni-decrease ang asset. Use of asset, ni-decrease ang asset at the same time, ni-decrease ang liabilities. Or ni-decrease ang asset at the same time, ni-decrease ang owner's equity. Under exchange of claims, okay, there's no effect on the asset. So, ang nag-change lang ang katulang liabilities and owner's equity sa right side lang of the equation. So, exchange of claims, the effects are increase in liabilities equals decrease in owner's equity. Decrease in liabilities equals increase in owner's equity. Then, increase in liability equals decrease in other liability, or increase in owner's equity equals decrease in owner's equity. So those are the types of effects of transactions.